Back in 2006, I flew to Atlanta. I ended up in Alpharetta, Georgia at the Gwinnett Center. It's a large arena for the Catalyst Conference. It's a young adult leadership conference, or at least it was at the time, and there was a pastor speaking. His name's Andy Stanley. And he said something that has stuck with me for 15 years. I've never forgot it. He said, every restaurant basically serves the same thing: beef, chicken, or fish. The only thing that separates McDonald's from Ruth's Chris is the preparation and the presentation. Today I want to talk to you about public speaking and how to improve your public speaking and become better in this area. We're all going to be put in situations, whether it's a sales pitch or whether it's a meeting with a client or whether it's speaking in front of a group or an audience, where we have to give a public speech. And in this moment, we've got to make sure we do a good job and we're well prepared and ready to present. And I want to talk about this. So I'm calling this Beef, Chicken, or Fish, Improving Your Public Speaking. The first thing Andy Stanley said is you got to have killer preparation. So let's talk about preparation. If you think you're going to wing it, and you think with charisma that you're going to execute killer presentations, the truth is it's never going to work. Now, you might entertain people, but they're going to walk away with very little substance, and you want to be able to show them as a consultant, as an ad writer, you're ready to make a contribution that has real value. So let's talk about preparation. These are things I've learned. I have to prepare a new speech, a new sermon every single Sunday, and I preach somewhere between 48 and 50 weekends a year. So I'm at least doing 50 new presentations that I've got to prepare for. And so I've learned this over 20 years of preparing. I've been doing this 20 years now. It's a whole lot of presentations that I've been given. So let's talk about the preparation side of it. The first thing, when it's going to be killer preparation, is you got to have a method. There has to be some method to the madness. There's a lot of different methods out there. This is one I'm actually using currently. It was a method taught to Sunday school teachers back in the 1930s and 40s that I came across, and I find it to be very powerful. It's called hook, book, look, and took. Let me break this down. Hook is the big idea that you're going to open with, but it's usually going to be a story or an insight or an illustration that is going to be to capture the audience's attention. What we want to do is we want to come out of the gate grabbing them and capturing their attention. For those ad writers out there, this is the equivalent of your headline. I believe it was Ogilvy who said, after you've written your headline, you spend 80% of your ad budget because 80% of people only read the headline. Your hook is the most critical part of any speech that you deliver. I would say that I spend between 50 and 60% of my preparation trying to make sure that I've got the right hook and I've got it honed down so I can capture people's attention right out of the gate. After your hook, you're going to have book. This means you're going to go to some fact, some opinion, some insight that you're either going to endorse or challenge. So let's take a presentation or some information we're all familiar with, calculating your ad budget. The book for calculating your ad budget is to say, the Small Business Association of the United States has said that you should calculate 5% of your annual budget towards advertising and marketing. And then we challenge it. We don't endorse it, we challenge it. We say, but this fails to consider that the cheapest form of advertising is expensive rent, and location-based traffic determines how much you need to spend on advertising. So you have to combine your rent budget, should be 5%, and your ad budget, which should be 5%, to come together with a total budget to determine your cost of exposure. That is the book in that situation. Then we have look. Look is where we're going to structure our presentation and we're going to make our points. Now, a typical speech you're going to give should have somewhere between 3 and 7 points, depending on what you're trying to say and how much time you have to say it. Now, the truth is many presentations might have 1 or 2, and some could have as many as 30 or even 100. And that's a whole different method we could talk about, which is kind of rapid fire, quick attacking, and you can do that and keep everybody's attention attention and give everybody something, but typically you're going to have between 3 and 7. And you're going to make a point, and then I'm going to tell you in the next little bit how to do this, how to do the look portion. And then you have took, which is your takeaway. So what do you want people to take away at the end? That's how you're going to close your presentation. And so you want to have a method. Now, a second thing to have killer preparation is you got to make a point. You got to know how to make a point. And we're going to have any number of points we're making in our look section. And those points, everyone, when we make a point, we want to have explanation of what the point is, an illustration of how the point looks, an application of how you apply the point into your given context. That doesn't have to be in this order. You can mix it up. You can go illustration or application first. You can end with explanation. You can mix it any way that you want, but you have to have this for every point that you make. Explain it to me, show it to me, and then tell me how I can put it into practice. And so let's take our expensive rent is the cheapest form of advertising. Our illustration would simply be Walgreens. You'll never find a Walgreens that's not in a dominant location because they understand the value of expensive rent, and that's why they're bigger than all the other pharmacies like Rite Aid and CVS combined. That would be an illustration. It's a simple idea. It's something we put out there and we illustrate. Then we tell them how that they need to apply it. And so this becomes the way we make a point. So every point has to have explanation, illustration, and application. Then here's a third thing for killer preparation. And this is something most people are just too lazy to do, but not you. You've got to memorize your material. Now, it's nice when you can give a presentation in a controlled environment. You can have your PowerPoint or your keynote or your pro presenter or whatever the way that you want it. You can play music. You can control the mood and the atmosphere of the room. This is why Wizard Academy is such a powerful place, because it's such a controlled environment to do all those things. But a lot of times you have to give a presentation where you have no control over the environment at all. And the way you execute powerfully in those moments is by memorizing your material. You have to know what it is that you're saying. Every point that you're going to make, you should have memorized and should be able to deliver without any presentation material whatsoever at all. Don't rely on the media that you brought with you or the tools that you brought with you. Just rely on yourself. Now, when it comes to memorizing, there's 3 ways you can encode this information into your memory, and you need to use all 3. One is visually. This is the way you look at it. This is where most people who are building a presentation in some presentation software, this is as far as they go. They just encode it in what's the next slide, what's coming up next, visually. But you can also add to that auditory or phonological or acoustical encoding. This is where you record yourself delivering the presentation or at least talking through the slides, and then you go back and you listen to it as a part of encoding it through an acoustic method. But then there's the one that I like the most and I think is the most powerful and is most underused, and this is where you use procedural encoding. So every sermon I deliver, every Sunday, I handwrite all of the main points and all of the subpoints and the topic of the illustrations that I'm going to use. I handwrite them because that moves it into my procedural memory. It's a procedural encoding. And so you want to use these tactics in order to memorize what it is you're going to say. And then the last part of killer preparation is to evaluate yourself regularly. And what this means is anytime, especially if you've got a presentation you're going to give multiple times, every time you give it, you should evaluate it. And if it was video recorded, you need to watch the video. You need to look at your movements. You need to look at your facial expressions. You need to see yourself do it. Then it helps to listen to it. I would recommend that you have some recording device, even if it's a microphone that's connected to your phone, that every time you deliver it, you record it just for yourself, and then you go back and listen to it without seeing yourself. Just the words, your tone, how powerful it was, your pace, all of these things are incredibly valuable to evaluate. Then the script. You want to get the presentation, you want to take the audio or the video, send it to rev.com or some other transcription service. Rev's expensive, but it's real accurate and it's real quick turnaround. And you get back the presentation in written form, and it allows you to read it and to see the ideas that were difficult to understand, or the points that you never really finished, or the things you thought you said you didn't actually say. You want to constantly evaluate because it's a part of the preparation process. Killer preparation takes those 4 things. Then there's killer presentation. So let's talk about the presentation itself. One thing it takes to have a killer presentation is what I call owning the silence. Don't avoid it, employ it. Here's what I mean. The reason most people say, filling all of the blank spaces is because the silence makes them incredibly uncomfortable. Silence is powerful when you're delivering a presentation. It allows people to evaluate themselves. It allows the thoughts to breathe. It allows them to reflect. It allows them to think while you're talking. Own the silence. Bring the silence with you. I opened a sermon one time with 1 minute of silence. And it was amazing. The people in the room, they began coughing, they began laughing, they began fidgeting. They weren't comfortable with the silence. Then after a minute of silence, I said, the psalm says, be still and know that I'm God. A minute of silence lets us know how difficult it is to be still. Boom, that's my hook. Now I'm ready to go from there. We all need to own the silence. Be comfortable with the silence. Let's say something's not working. It's okay to let people sit there in silence. We don't have to tap dance and fill every minute of everything. Here's the second thing. Pace, pace, pace. They say the first rule of real estate is location, location, location. I'm telling you the first rule of public speaking is pace, pace, pace. So many people struggle with the pace of their presentation. I'm not talking about how fast you're speaking. I'm talking about, are you keeping the presentation moving forward? Many people get stuck. They either do this in one of two ways. They do this when they make a point, explain it, then illustrate it, and then explain it, and then illustrate it, and then explain it, and then illustrate it. We got it, buddy. We understand. Move on. You got to keep the pace moving. Every time you re-explain something, every time you re-illustrate something, you take the power away from the first one that you did. Find the best explanation and the best illustration, make it and move on to the next point. The other place people get stuck is in the introduction. Far too many long and boring introductions. I don't need the opening 8 minutes to be about you and your family. That's not what we're here for. If you want to talk about your family, do it in the midst of your presentation. But open with a powerful hook, take me to the book, and then get me to start looking. As we're looking, if you want to talk about your family and all those things, that's a great way to do it. But you want to make sure that you have as short of an introduction as you can possibly get away with so that you can get into the rest of what you're doing. Then add humor. Man, this is so important. Please, please, please add humor into every single presentation that you make. This might be through telling a humorous story or an anecdote. It could be through self-deprecation. It could be through telling jokes. All of these are things you can do. You can just go look up jokes online. Go memorize 4 or 5 jokes. If you repeat them every time you make the presentation, no big deal at all. People love a joke. They want to laugh. When they laugh, they let down their guard. When they laugh, they like you. When they laugh, they listen to what you have to say. When they laugh, it gives you credibility. You want to make sure that every single presentation has humor. Even if you got to open it with joke number 1 and just tell us the joke, I'll take it. I was talking to Whittington. He was telling me about a guy that started showing up on Fridays to the Fang and Feather. And when he would show up, he started ordering a whiskey neat, but he would get 3 whiskeys. And he would drink all 3, and then he would order another set of 3 and drink all 3, always to himself, always sitting by himself. Whittington thought this was strange, so he went and inquired, man, what's the deal with the 3 whiskeys? You know, most people just get 1 whiskey and then get another one when they're done with the first one. Same kind every time. And he said, look, man, I grew up in the Midwest, and I got 2 brothers. We've all been really close, and we've all been successful. One, he's moved out to California. Another's moved to New York, and I ended up here in Austin. And we agreed, just as a group of brothers, that anytime we went out and had a drink, we would order 3 drinks just to remember one another. Man, what a great story. Everybody kind of liked that idea. It kind of got around. It was such a cool thing. Well, a few months goes by, every Friday, same thing, 3 whiskeys. The guy walks in, and this time he orders 2 whiskeys. And he sits down with the 2 whiskeys. And Whittington is like, man, I feel so bad for the guy. Obviously, one of his brothers must have passed away. So he went up to him, he said, look, man, I'm really, really sorry to hear about your brother. And the guy kind of looked at him sideways and said, hear about my brother? What you talking about? He said, well, man, I saw you order 2 whiskeys. So I figured one of your brothers passed away. And the man started laughing. He said, oh, no, man. One of my brothers didn't pass away. I just decided that I was going to give up drinking. Now, that's a joke that I customized to our setting. I used a person that you knew. I didn't tell you it was a joke going in. It's not a true story at all, but it's kind of funny. At the end of the day, a powerful way to use jokes is to customize them to your audience. You take whatever the group of people you are, you begin to apply it into their setting, you apply it to the people that you know. It's a great way to add humor. It's also a great way that you can take a really inappropriate joke and make it appropriate to your setting if it's a little too crass or too crude or it doesn't meet your personal style. Now, Andy Stanley said the only thing that separates Ruth's Chris from McDonald's is preparation and presentation. When I heard it, I agreed with him, but the more I thought about it, I think he was missing something. You know, New Orleans has been very famous for its restaurants. I mean, we've got great eating. It doesn't matter where you go. Many of you guys came down to the partner meeting when we had here, and you got a taste of that, and you know what I'm talking about. Now, there's been many famous chefs that have come through New Orleans. I mean, I remember in the 80s, it was Paul Prudhomme. He opened K-Paul's, famous for his Magic Seasons blend. And in the 70s, it was the Brennan family. They had Commander's Palace and Brennan's and invented Bananas Foster and all of these things. Well, in the 90s, the king of New Orleans chefs wasn't from New Orleans at all. He's from New England. He's a guy named Emeril Lagasse. You probably heard of him before. And Emeril, in 1990, opened up his flagship namesake restaurant, Emeril's. It's still there today. It's the greatest pork chop in the world. And Emeril set himself apart from every other local chef because he decided, he was the starter of this. Everybody's copied it since, but he kind of initiated this. He said, in my restaurant, I'm only going to use the greatest ingredients in the world. We're going to have the best meat. We're going to have the best seafood. We're going to have the best seasonings. We're going to have the best vegetables. We're going to have the best pastries. Everything is going to be the greatest ingredients that we can get our hands on. The last thing it takes to have a killer presentation, killer public speaking, is the preparation, the presentation, is having the right ingredients. And this is what's so cool about the Wizard of Ads Partner Group. We got the best ingredients. You look around at how smart everybody is, how insightful everybody is, the angle of approach everybody brings, the great writers that we have, the great ideas, and you begin to see everything that everybody brings. These are just all ingredients we're putting in the pantry that somebody gets to use to add preparation and presentation to make a killer dish. At the end of the day, you think about it. When you have a great meal, what's the one thing it tastes like? More. Give me some more of that. When you've got the best ingredients, the right presentation, and the right preparation, it leaves people hungering and wanting more. So let's hope that 2021, the rest of 2020, depending on how it shapes out, becomes a year where we leave our clients and our audience and our people satiating and hungering and wanting more. Thank you guys for listening to me.